The morning sun cast long shadows across the university campus as students hurried to their first classes. Among them was Maya, a 21-year-old music student, who carried something different from the usual backpacks and textbooks. She wheeled a small cart behind her, carefully balancing a portable keyboard and a worn leather case that had seen better days. Maya had been doing this routine for 3 months now, every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 8 in the morning. She would set up her little music station right by the old oak tree in the center of campus, where the paths from 4 different buildings met. It was the perfect spot. Students from all majors passed by here, and the tree provided just enough shade to keep her keyboard from overheating in the sun. As she unpacked her equipment, a few early birds stopped to watch. Maya smiled at them, her fingers already dancing across the keys as she tested the sound. The first song she played was always the same, a gentle melody she had composed herself about new beginnings. The notes floated through the crisp morning air, and something magical happened. Students who had been rushing to class began to slow down. Some even stopped completely. Maya's music wasn't just background noise. When she played classical pieces, her fingers moved with the precision of someone who had been practicing since childhood. But it was her original compositions that really caught people's attention. These songs told stories about late-night studying, about missing home, about dreams that felt too big for small-town kids. Every student who heard them felt like Maya was speaking directly to their heart. By 8:30, a small crowd had gathered. There was Jake, the engineering student who always looked stressed but seemed to relax whenever he heard Maya play. There was Lisa, who studied business but secretly wrote poetry and found inspiration in Maya's melodies. And there was old Mr. Peterson, the campus groundskeeper who would pause his work just to listen for a few minutes before continuing on his way. Maya's keyboard case lay open beside her, and people dropped coins and dollar bills into it as they passed. She never asked for money, never even looked at the donations. She was too focused on her music, too lost in the joy of sharing something beautiful with people who needed it. What most people didn't know was why. Maya was really there. She wasn't just playing for fun or even just for the money, though she desperately needed every dollar. Maya was a first-generation college student studying music therapy. Her parents had worked double shifts at the local factory to help her get to university. But even with their sacrifices and her student loans, money was tight. The donations from her morning performances helped pay for basic things like textbooks, groceries, and the gas money to drive to her internship at the Children's Hospital. At the hospital, Maya worked with kids who were going through tough times. Some were recovering from surgery, others were dealing with chronic illnesses, and a few were struggling with emotional trauma. She had discovered that music could reach these children in ways that traditional therapy sometimes couldn't. A simple lullaby could calm a scared 5-year-old before surgery. An upbeat song could motivate a teenager to do their physical therapy exercises. Maya's professors had told her she had a natural gift for this work, but she knew the real magic happened when she combined her formal training with the raw, honest music she played every morning on campus. This particular Tuesday morning started like any other. Maya was halfway through a piece by Chopin when she noticed him, a man in an expensive suit walking across the quad with quick, determined steps. Unlike the students who moved with the relaxed pace of people who belonged there, this man walked like he owned the place. And in many ways, he did. Dean Harrison had been at the university for 15 years, working his way up from a junior administrator to his current position. He was known throughout the campus for 2 things: his strict adherence to rules and his complete lack of tolerance for anything he considered unprofessional or inappropriate. Students whispered stories about him, how he had banned food trucks from campus because they created unseemly congregations, how he had tried to limit the hours that student organizations could meet because their activities were disruptive to the academic environment. Dean Harrison's morning routine was as predictable as Maya's. Every day at 8:45, he would walk from his car in the faculty parking lot to his office in the administration building. He preferred this route because it allowed him to observe campus life and identify any issues that needed his attention. And on this particular morning, Maya's music reached his ears just as he rounded the corner near the oak tree. He stopped walking and frowned. The sound of music was coming from somewhere ahead, and there seemed to be a group of students gathered around something. Dean Harrison quickened his pace, his jaw tightening as he got closer and could see what was happening. There, right in the middle of his perfectly maintained campus, was a young woman with a keyboard, playing music and collecting money from students. Dean Harrison's face turned red. This was exactly the kind of unauthorized activity that he had spent years trying to eliminate from the university grounds. Maya was so focused on her music that she didn't notice Dean Harrison approaching until his shadow fell across her keyboard. She looked up to see a stern-faced man in a dark suit standing directly in front of her, his arms crossed and his expression cold. "Excuse me," Dean Harrison said, his voice cutting through the music and causing several students to look over. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" Maya's hand stopped moving across the keys, and the beautiful melody came to an abrupt halt. The sudden silence felt heavy and uncomfortable. She looked up at the man, confused by his hostile tone. "I'm sorry," Maya said, her voice quiet but polite. "I'm just playing some music before classes start." "You're soliciting money on university property without proper authorization," Dean Harrison replied, his voice getting louder. Other students began to stop and stare, sensing that something was wrong. "This is a clear violation of university policy regarding commercial activities on campus grounds." Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment as more people gathered around to watch the confrontation. She had never thought of her music as a commercial activity. She was just sharing something she loved with people who seemed to enjoy it. "I'm not soliciting anything," Maya explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm a student here, and I'm just playing music. People sometimes put money in my case, but I never ask them to." "That's irrelevant," Dean Harrison snapped. "The fact that you're collecting money makes this a commercial enterprise, and commercial enterprises are strictly prohibited on campus without proper permits and administrative approval." The crowd of students was growing larger now, and Maya could see phones being pulled out to record what was happening. She felt mortified, but also confused. She had been playing here for months without any problems. Several professors had even stopped to listen and compliment her music. "I understand your concern," Maya said, standing up from her small folding chair. "But I'm a music therapy student, and this helps me pay for my education. I'm not hurting anyone, and people seem to enjoy the music." Dean Harrison's expression grew even colder. "Your personal financial situation is not the university's problem, and it certainly doesn't give you the right to violate campus policies. I'm issuing you a formal ban from performing any unauthorized musical activities on university property. If you're found doing this again, there will be academic consequences." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Academic consequences meant her degree could be at risk. All the work she had put in, all the sacrifices her family had made, could be threatened by something as simple as sharing her music. Some of the students in the crowd began to murmur their disapproval. Jake, the engineering student, stepped forward. "Come on, man," he said to Dean Harrison. "She's not bothering anyone. Her music makes this place better." Dean Harrison turned his cold stare toward Jake. "And you are?" "I'm a student here, and I think you're being completely unreasonable," Jake replied, his voice shaking slightly but determined. "Then you can take your concerns to the appropriate channels," Dean Harrison said dismissively. "This matter is closed." Maya began packing up her keyboard with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears that she was determined not to let fall in front of everyone. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence as she folded up her chair and put her keyboard back in its case. Dean Harrison stood there, watching her every move, as if making sure she wouldn't leave anything behind that might tempt her to return. As Maya wheeled her cart away from the oak tree, she could hear the students behind her talking in angry, hushed voices. Some were already posting about what had happened on social media, but Maya was too devastated to feel encouraged by their support. All she could think about was how she was going to pay for her textbooks next month, and how the children at the hospital would ask her why she seemed so sad during their next session. Dean Harrison watched her go, satisfied that he had handled another campus disruption efficiently. He had no idea that his actions had just set in motion a series of events that would change everything, not just for Maya, but for the entire university community. Maya sat in her tiny dorm room that evening, staring at the keyboard that now felt more like a burden than a blessing. The small space she shared with her roommate felt even smaller now, cramped with the equipment she could no longer use to earn money. Her laptop was open on her desk, showing the harsh reality of her bank account balance. Without the income from her morning performances, she would struggle to buy groceries for the next 2 weeks, let alone afford the textbooks she needed for her advanced music therapy courses. Her phone had been buzzing all day, with messages from other students who had witnessed the confrontation. Jake had texted her at least 5 times, asking if she was okay and offering to help however he could. Lisa had sent her a long message about how unfair the whole situation was. Even students she didn't know personally had reached out after seeing videos of the incident that were now circulating on social media. Maya's roommate, Priya, came back from her evening classes to find Maya sitting in the dark, her keyboard still in its case by the door. "Hey, are you okay?" Priya asked, turning on the desk lamp. "I heard about what happened this morning. Everyone's talking about it." Maya managed a weak smile. "I'm fine. Just trying to figure out what to do next." But she wasn't fine, and they both knew it. Maya had been counting on that income to help her through the semester. More than that, those morning performances had become an important part of her routine. Playing music for other students, seeing their faces light up when they heard a song they loved, watching stressed-out kids relax for just a few minutes before facing their day. It had given Maya a sense of purpose beyond just earning money. The next morning, Maya walked past the oak tree on her way to class. It felt strange to see the spot empty, to hear only the sound of footsteps and conversation instead of music. Several students noticed her walking by and waved, offering encouraging smiles. But Maya could also see Dean Harrison's office window from where she stood, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he might be watching, making sure she didn't try to set up her equipment again. In her music therapy class, Professor Williams noticed that Maya seemed distracted. After the other students had left, she approached Maya's desk. "I heard about what happened yesterday," Professor Williams said gently. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. Professor Williams had been one of her biggest supporters, always encouraging her to pursue her passion for music therapy and praising her natural ability to connect with patients. "I don't understand why it was such a big deal," Maya said. "I was just playing music. I wasn't hurting anyone. Sometimes people in positions of power feel threatened by things they don't understand," Professor Williams replied. "Your music brings joy to people, and that's a powerful thing. Some people don't know how to handle that kind of positive energy." Meanwhile, across campus, the story was spreading faster than Maya realized. Jake had posted a detailed account of what he had witnessed on the university's unofficial social media page, and it had been shared hundreds of times. Students were commenting with their own stories about how Maya's music had brightened their mornings, how her songs had helped them through difficult times, how the campus felt a little less welcoming without her performances. One comment that got a lot of attention came from a student named David, who wrote, "Maya's music got me through my worst semester. I was dealing with depression and anxiety, and hearing her play every Tuesday and Thursday gave me something to look forward to. She probably doesn't even know how much her music meant to people like me." Another student, Rachel, shared, "I'm a single mom trying to finish my degree, and I would bring my daughter to campus sometimes when I couldn't find childcare. Maya always smiled at us and would play Disney songs when she saw my little girl. She made us feel welcome when everything else felt so hard." The comments kept coming, each one painting a picture of how Maya's music had touched lives in ways she never fully understood. Students talked about how her original compositions had inspired them to pursue their own creative dreams, how her classical pieces had introduced them to music they had never appreciated before, how her presence had made the campus feel more like a community. But the story was also reaching people who weren't so supportive. Some comments defended Dean Harrison's actions, arguing that rules were rules and that Maya should have gotten proper permission before performing on campus. A few people suggested that she was just trying to get attention or make money off sympathetic students. Dean Harrison himself was becoming aware of the growing controversy, though he remained convinced that he had done the right thing. His secretary showed him some of the social media posts, and he dismissed them as emotional overreactions from students who don't understand the importance of maintaining order and following proper procedures. "If we allow one person to break the rules, where does it end?" he told his assistant. "Next, we'll have people selling things on campus, holding unauthorized rallies, turning the university into a marketplace instead of an institution of learning." What Dean Harrison didn't know was that his harsh treatment of Maya had revealed things about her life that made the situation even more compelling to the students who were following the story. Through conversations with her friends and classmates, word was spreading about Maya's background. People learned that Maya was the first person in her family to attend college. Her parents had both worked factory jobs their entire lives, often pulling double shifts to save money for her education. Maya herself worked 3 part-time jobs in addition to her studies. She tutored younger students in music theory. She worked at a local coffee shop on weekends, and she had an internship at the Children's Hospital where she used music therapy techniques with young patients. The hospital internship was particularly meaningful to Maya, though she rarely talked about it. 3 days a week, she would drive to the pediatric ward and work with children who were facing serious health challenges. There was Tommy, a 7-year-old who was recovering from heart surgery and who would only calm down when Maya played his favorite song. There was Aisha, a 12-year-old with cancer who had started writing her own songs with Maya's encouragement. There was Carlos, a teenager who had been in a car accident and was learning to walk again, who used Maya's upbeat compositions to motivate himself during physical therapy sessions. These children didn't care about university, policies, or administrative procedures. They only knew that Maya had a gift for making them feel better, for helping them find hope and strength through music. And Maya was passionate about this work, planning to pursue a career in music therapy specifically because she had seen how powerful it could be. But now, without the income from her campus performances, Maya was worried about being able to continue her internship. The hospital was 30 minutes away, and gas money was becoming a real concern. She had already been eating more meals of instant noodles and peanut butter sandwiches than she cared to admit, and the thought of having to choose between her education and her basic needs was keeping her awake at night. As the week progressed, more students began to speak out about the situation. The university's student newspaper picked up the story, interviewing several students who had been regular listeners to Maya's performances. The article painted a picture of a young woman who was working hard to achieve her dreams while bringing joy to others, contrasted against an administrator who seemed more concerned with rigid rule following than with fostering the kind of creative, supportive community that universities should represent. The newspaper article also revealed another important detail that many people hadn't known. Maya's performances weren't just random entertainment. They were actually part of her coursework. Professor Williams confirmed that Maya had been documenting how her music affected different audiences as part of a research project on the therapeutic benefits of public performance. Her morning sessions at the Oak Tree had been providing valuable data for her senior thesis on how music could be used to reduce stress and build community in institutional settings. This revelation made Dean Harrison's ban seem even more unreasonable. He hadn't just stopped a student from earning some extra money. He had interfered with legitimate academic research and disrupted a project that could have contributed valuable knowledge to the field of music therapy. By the end of the week, the story had grown beyond just campus gossip. Local news outlets had picked up on the controversy, framing it as a story about creativity versus bureaucracy, about supporting students versus rigid rule enforcement. Maya found herself at the center of a debate she had never wanted to be part of, feeling overwhelmed by the attention and unsure of what to do next. But she also began to realize that her music had meant more to people than she had ever imagined. The outpouring of support from students, the stories about how her performances had helped people through difficult times, the recognition that her work was valuable and meaningful. All of this gave her a new sense of purpose and determination. Maya might have been silenced for now, but her voice was still echoing across campus in ways that Dean Harrison had never anticipated. The question was, what would happen next? 2 weeks had passed since Maya's ban, and the campus felt different. Students noticed the absence of her morning music more than anyone had expected. The area around the Oak Tree seemed quieter, less vibrant somehow. But what Dean Harrison didn't realize was that Maya's silencing had sparked something much bigger than he could have imagined. It started small. Jake, the engineering student who had defended Maya during the confrontation, couldn't get her music out of his head. He had recorded several of her performances on his phone over the months, and one evening while studying, he decided to play one of her original compositions through his laptop speakers. His roommate heard it from the hallway and came in to listen. "Man, I miss hearing this on campus," his roommate said. It always made Tuesday mornings bearable. That gave Jake an idea. The next Tuesday morning, he set up his portable speaker near the Oak Tree and played one of Maya's recordings. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, just like they used to when Maya performed live. Students stood around listening, some closing their eyes and swaying to the familiar melodies. Word spread quickly through text messages and social media. By Thursday, 3 more students had brought speakers to different locations around campus, playing Maya's music simultaneously during the morning hours when she used to perform. It wasn't coordinated, but it felt like a movement Maya heard about. These tribute performances from Priya, who came rushing into their dorm room with excitement. "You have to see this," Priya said, showing Maya her phone. Someone had posted a video of students gathered around Jake's speaker, listening to her music, with the same peaceful expressions they used to have during her live performances. Maya felt a mix of emotions watching the video. She was touched that people missed her music enough to recreate the experience, but it also made her realize how much she missed performing. Playing in her dorm room wasn't the same as sharing her music with people who needed it. Meanwhile, the underground movement was growing in ways that surprised everyone involved. Students in the music department started what they called Maya Mondays, informal gatherings, where they would play her compositions and discuss how music could be used for healing and community building. The psychology students organized listening sessions where they analyzed the therapeutic effects of her melodies. Even students from completely different majors found ways to incorporate her story into their own projects and discussions. Lisa, the business student who wrote poetry, started a hashtag called #LetMayaPlay. It began trending on the university's social media platforms. Students shared their own stories about how Maya's music had affected them, creating a digital archive of her impact that was impossible to ignore. But the most significant development happened when Professor Elena Rodriguez returned from her sabbatical. Professor Rodriguez had been away for 6 months, conducting research on music therapy programs at universities across Europe. She was the head of the music department, beloved by students and respected by faculty for her innovative approaches to music education and her genuine care for her students' well-being. On her first day back, Professor Rodriguez heard whispers about some situation with a music student and Dean Harrison. She didn't think much of it until she saw students gathered around speakers playing music she didn't recognize. Beautiful, sophisticated compositions that sounded like the work of an advanced student. "Whose music is this?" she asked one of her graduate students. "It's Maya Chun's. You don't know about Maya?" the student asked, surprised. "She's one of the most talented students in the program, but Dean Harrison banned her from performing on campus." Professor Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. She knew Maya by reputation. Professor Williams had mentioned her several times as an exceptionally gifted student who showed real promise in music therapy. But Professor Rodriguez had never heard Maya perform or seen her compositions. Evening, Professor Rodriguez spent hours listening to recordings of Maya's music and reading about what had happened. She watched the videos of Dean Harrison's confrontation with Maya, read the newspaper articles, and scrolled through hundreds of social media posts from students sharing their experiences. What she discovered made her both amazed and angry. Maya's compositions were sophisticated and emotionally complex, showing a level of musical maturity that was rare in undergraduate students. Her ability to connect with audiences and create therapeutic experiences through performance was exactly the kind of talent that the music department should be celebrating and nurturing. Professor Rodriguez immediately requested Maya's academic files and was even more impressed by what she found. Maya's grades were excellent. Her research project on public performance therapy was groundbreaking, and her internship supervisor at the Children's Hospital had written glowing reports about her natural ability to use music as a healing tool. The next morning, Professor Rodriguez knocked on Maya's dorm room door. Maya answered, surprised to see the department head standing in the hallway. "Maya, I'm Professor Rodriguez. I just returned from sabbatical, and I need to talk with you about what's been happening." They sat in the common area, and Professor Rodriguez listened as Maya explained the whole situation from her perspective. She could see the pain in Maya's eyes, but also the determination that hadn't been broken by Dean Harrison's harsh treatment. "Maya, I want you to know that what happened to you was wrong," Professor Rodriguez said firmly, "and I'm going to do everything in my power to fix it." Professor Rodriguez spent the next few days conducting her own investigation. She discovered that Dean Harrison had exceeded his authority in several ways. First, Maya's performances fell under the category of student artistic expression, which was protected by the university's own policies on academic freedom. Second, since Maya's performances were part of her coursework and research project, banning them constituted interference with legitimate academic activities. Third, Dean Harrison had failed to follow proper procedures for addressing policy violations, which required giving students a chance to respond and seek appeals. Professor Rodriguez also discovered something else that made the situation even more troubling. Dean Harrison had a pattern of targeting students from lower-income backgrounds, often finding technical rule violations to use against students who were working to support themselves through college. Maya wasn't his first victim. There had been others over the years who had been silenced or discouraged from pursuing activities that helped them financially, or academically. Armed with this information, Professor Rodriguez began building a formal case against Dean Harrison's actions. She reached out to other faculty members who had been unaware of the situation, and their response was immediate and supportive. The music therapy professor was particularly outraged, explaining that Maya's work was contributing valuable research to their field, and that her ban was hindering important academic progress. Professor Rodriguez also connected with the students, who had been organizing the informal tribute performances. She was impressed by their creativity and dedication, but she also realized that their underground movement could be channeled into something more official and effective. "What you're all doing is beautiful," she told a group of student organizers who had gathered in her office. "But we need to do more than just play Maya's music. We need to challenge the system that allowed this to happen in the first place." The students were eager to help, and Professor Rodriguez began organizing what she called constructive resistance. Instead of just playing Maya's recordings, they would organize educational events about music therapy, academic freedom, and the importance of supporting student creativity. They would document the positive effects that Maya's music had on campus life, gathering evidence to support their case for overturning the ban. The movement was also gaining attention from unexpected sources. Alumni who had heard about the situation through social media and news coverage began reaching out to the university, expressing their disappointment in how Maya had been treated. Some were significant donors who threatened to reduce their contributions if the university didn't address the situation appropriately. Local musicians and music therapists in the community also began speaking out. They had read about Maya's work and were impressed by her commitment to using music for healing. Several offered to provide testimonials about the value of her research and the importance of supporting students like her who were advancing the field. Dean Harrison, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly defensive as pressure mounted from multiple directions. He insisted to anyone who would listen that he had simply been doing his job, enforcing important rules that maintained order on campus. But even some of his own staff members were beginning to question whether his response had been proportionate to the situation. The tipping point came when Professor Rodriguez presented her findings to the university's faculty senate. She laid out a clear case showing that Dean Harrison had violated multiple university policies in his treatment of Maya, and that his actions had damaged both the student and the institution's reputation. The faculty senate voted unanimously to call for a review of Dean Harrison's actions and to demand that Maya's ban be reconsidered through proper channels. They also passed a resolution supporting student artistic. The pressure on Dean Harrison was building from every direction, and he was starting to feel like he was fighting a war on multiple fronts. What had begun as a simple enforcement of campus rules had somehow spiraled into a full-blown controversy that was making his job increasingly difficult. The morning after the faculty senate's vote, Dean Harrison arrived at his office to find his secretary looking uncomfortable. She handed him a stack of printed emails and phone messages that had come in overnight. "Sir, we've received over 200 messages about the Maya-chan situation," she said quietly. "Most of them are not supportive of your decision." Dean Harrison flipped through the messages, his jaw tightening with each one he read. Alumni were expressing disappointment. Parents of current students were asking questions about the university's commitment to supporting student success. Local business owners were concerned about the negative publicity the school was receiving. But what really bothered Dean Harrison was a message from the university's Board of Trustees. The board chair had left a voicemail requesting a meeting to discuss recent campus developments and their impact on the university's reputation. Dean Harrison knew that when the board started asking questions, his job could be in jeopardy. Meanwhile, Maya's story had reached beyond the university community in ways that surprised everyone. A local news station had picked up the story after seeing the social media buzz, and the report had been shared widely online. The segment painted Maya as a hard-working student who was being punished for trying to earn money for her education while bringing joy to others. The news coverage caught the attention of other universities with music therapy programs, and several professors from different schools reached out to Professor Rodriguez to express their support for Maya. Dr. Patricia Wong from the State University's music therapy program wrote a letter that Professor Rodriguez shared widely. Maya Chun's work represents exactly the kind of innovative, community-focused approach that our field needs. Her research on public performance therapy could contribute valuable insights to how we use music to build stronger, healthier communities. Any institution would be fortunate to have a student of her caliber. This professional support added weight to the growing calls for Maya's reinstatement, but it also made Dean Harrison more defensive. He began reaching out to his own network of administrators at other universities, looking for support for his position. We can't let students think they can just ignore rules because they have a sob story, he told a colleague during a phone call. If we back down every time there's a social media campaign, we'll lose all authority on campus. But even some of Dean Harrison's usual allies were questioning his handling of the situation. The university's legal counsel had quietly reviewed the case and determined that Maya's ban was legally questionable. The public relations department was fielding calls from reporters and trying to manage a story that was making the university look inflexible and unsupportive of student success. The situation reached a new level when Maya's story was featured on a popular podcast about social justice issues in education. The host interviewed Maya over the phone, and her genuine, soft-spoken responses about her love for music therapy and her commitment to helping others resonated with listeners across the country. I never meant for this to become such a big deal, Maya said during the interview. I just wanted to share music with people and help pay for my education so I could continue working with children who need music therapy. I don't understand why that was seen as something harmful. The podcast episode was downloaded thousands of times and shared widely on social media, bringing even more attention to Maya's situation. Comments poured in from music therapists, educators, and parents who were inspired by Maya's story and outraged by her treatment. Professor Rodriguez was using this growing attention strategically. She had assembled what she called a documentation team of students and faculty who were gathering evidence of the positive impact Maya's performances had on campus life. They conducted surveys, collected testimonials, and compiled academic research that supported Maya's approach to public performance therapy. The team also discovered something interesting in the university's own policies. The handbook included language about supporting student entrepreneurship and creative expression that seemed to directly contradict Dean Harrison's interpretation of the rules. There was even a section about encouraging students to find innovative ways to fund their education through activities that aligned with their academic goals. Armed with this evidence, Professor Rodriguez requested a formal meeting with the university's administration to present Maya's case. She invited Maya to attend, along with several faculty members who supported her reinstatement. The meeting was scheduled in the main conference room of the administration building, and word spread quickly across campus. Students gathered outside, holding signs with messages like, "Let Maya play," and "Music heals." Some brought their own instruments and played Maya's compositions in the hallway, creating an impromptu concert that could be heard throughout the building. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. Dean Harrison sat at one end of the long table, flanked by his assistant and the university's legal counsel. Professor Rodriguez sat at the other end with Maya, Professor Williams, and two other faculty members who had joined their cause. University's provost, Dr. Jennifer Kim, moderated the meeting. She was known as a fair administrator who tried to balance rules with compassion, and everyone in the room was curious about where she would land on this issue. Professor Rodriguez, presented her case methodically. She showed data about the positive effects of Maya's performances on student well-being, demonstrated that Maya's activities were protected under university policies on academic freedom and student expression, and presented evidence that Dean Harrison had failed to follow proper procedures in issuing the ban. Maya's work isn't just about earning money, Professor Rodriguez explained. It's legitimate academic research that's contributing to our understanding of how music can be used therapeutically in community settings. Banning her performances is like banning a chemistry student from conducting experiments. Maya was invited to speak for herself, and she stood up nervously, her hands shaking slightly as she addressed the room. I know I should have asked for permission before I started performing, Maya said, her voice quiet but clear. But I never thought of what I was doing as breaking rules. I was just sharing something I love with people who seemed to enjoy it. The money people gave me helped me stay in school, but that wasn't the main reason I was there. I performed because music has the power to make people feel better, and I wanted to be part of that. She paused, looking directly at Dean Harrison. I understand that you are trying to do your job, but I hope you can understand that I was trying to do mine too. Music therapy is about bringing healing to people, and that's all I was trying to do. Dean Harrison's response was defensive and rigid. He insisted that rules were rules, that making exceptions would set a dangerous precedent, and that Maya's good intentions didn't excuse her violation of campus policies. If we allow one student to ignore proper procedures, where does it end? He argued. The university has rules for a reason, and my job is to enforce them fairly and consistently. But as the meeting continued, it became clear that Dean Harrison's position was becoming increasingly isolated. The legal counsel pointed out the policy inconsistencies that Professor Rodriguez had identified. The provost asked pointed questions about why Maya hadn't been given a chance to apply for proper permits before being banned entirely. The turning point came when finally Dr. Kim asked Dean Harrison about his pattern of enforcement. Professor Rodriguez had prepared a list of similar cases where Dean Harrison had taken harsh actions against students, particularly those from lower-income backgrounds. Dean Harrison, Dr. Kim said, reviewing the documents, I'm seeing several cases where you've interpreted rules very strictly when dealing with students who are working to support themselves through college. Can you explain this pattern? Dean Harrison's face reddened as he struggled to respond. He insisted that he treated all students equally, but the evidence suggested otherwise. A room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of what was being revealed. The meeting ended without a resolution, but it was clear that momentum had shifted decisively in Maya's favor. As they left the conference room, Maya felt cautiously hopeful for the first time in weeks. Outside, the students, who had been waiting, erupted in cheers when they saw Maya emerge from the building. Someone started playing one of her compositions on a guitar, and soon dozens of voices joined in singing along to the melody. Professor Rodriguez put her hand on Maya's shoulder as they walked through the crowd of supporters. This isn't over yet, she said, but I think we're going to win. Dean Harrison watched from his office window as the celebration continued outside. For the first time since this whole situation began, he started to wonder if his rigid interpretation of the rules might have been a mistake. But his pride wouldn't let him admit it, and he began planning what he saw as his last stand against what he viewed as mob rule on campus. 3 days after the administrative meeting, Dr. Kim called an emergency session of the university's Board of Trustees. The Maya Chun situation had grown beyond a simple campus dispute and was now affecting the university's reputation in ways that demanded immediate attention. Local media coverage had been picked up by national outlets, and the story was being framed as a test of whether universities truly supported student success or just paid lip service to it. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. in the university's main auditorium. What started as a closed administrative session quickly became something much larger when word spread across campus. Students, faculty, and even community members began asking if they could attend to show their support for Maya. Dr. Kim made the decision to open the meeting to the public, understanding that transparency was needed to restore trust in the universities. Leadership. The auditorium began filling up hours before the scheduled start time, with students camping out to secure seats. Maya spent the morning of the hearing in a state of nervous energy she had never experienced before. Professor Rodriguez had warned her that she might be asked to perform during the session, and the thought of playing music in front of such a large, formal audience was both thrilling and terrifying. "Remember," Professor Rodriguez told her as they walked toward the auditorium, "your music speaks for itself. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. Just be yourself and let your talent show." When they arrived at the auditorium, Maya was stunned by what she saw. The building was packed with people, and there were students standing in the aisles and sitting on the floor. Many held handmade signs supporting her, and she could see faces in the crowd that she recognized from her morning performances, people whose days she had brightened with her music over the past months. The board members took their seats on the stage, along with Dr. Kim and other university administrators. Dean Harrison sat at a table to one side, looking uncomfortable and isolated. His usual confident demeanor was nowhere to be seen, replaced by the tense expression of someone who knew he was fighting a losing battle. Dr. Kim opened the session by acknowledging the unusual circumstances that had brought them all together. "We're here today to address a situation that has raised important questions about our university's values and how we support our students," she began. "This started as an administrative matter, but it has become something much more significant. A reflection of who we are as an institution and what we stand for." Professor Rodriguez was the first to present, and she had prepared a comprehensive case that went far beyond Maya's individual situation. She showed how Maya's work exemplified the university's stated mission of preparing students to make positive contributions to their communities. She presented research demonstrating the therapeutic value of Maya's approach to public performance, and she revealed the pattern of harsh enforcement that Dean Harrison had applied disproportionately to students from lower-income backgrounds. Maya Chun represents the very best of what our university can produce, Professor Rodriguez concluded. She's a student who has found innovative ways to fund her education while conducting meaningful research and serving her community. Instead of celebrating her achievements, we've punished her for them. This doesn't just harm Maya. It sends a message to every student that creativity and entrepreneurship will be met with suspicion rather than support. When it was Dean Harrison's turn to speak, the auditorium fell silent. He stood slowly, his prepared remarks clutched in his hands, but as he looked out at the sea of faces watching him, something seemed to shift in his expression. "I want to begin by saying that I never intended for this situation to escalate as it has," Dean Harrison sighed, his voice quieter than usual. "When I encountered Ms. Chun performing on campus, I saw what I believed to be a violation of university policy, and I responded according to my understanding of the rules." He paused, looking down at his notes before continuing. "However, over the past few weeks, I've been forced to examine not just the specifics of this case, but my approach to enforcement in general. I've heard from students, faculty, and community members about the impact of my decision, and I've had to confront some uncomfortable truths about how my actions have affected people." The audience was listening intently, surprised by the reflective tone in Dean Harrison's voice. "Miss Chun, I owe you an apology," he said, turning to look directly at Maya. "Your music brought joy to this campus, and your dedication to your studies and your future career in music therapy is admirable. I was so focused on following rules that I failed to see the person behind the policy violation. I failed to see the value in what you are doing." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes, not from sadness but from relief and surprise. She had expected Dean Harrison to continue defending his actions, not to offer such a genuine-seeming apology. But Dean Harrison wasn't finished. "I also need to acknowledge that my enforcement of university policies has not been as fair and consistent as it should have been. The evidence presented today shows that I have indeed applied stricter standards to students who are working to support themselves through college, and that's not acceptable. My job is to support all students equally, not to make their lives more difficult." The auditorium erupted in surprised murmurs as people processed what they were hearing. Dr. Kim called for quiet and asked Dean Harrison to continue. "I am formally recommending that Ms. Chun's ban be overturned immediately," Dean Harrison said. "Furthermore, I believe the university should not only allow her to resume her performances, but should actively support her work. What she's doing represents exactly the kind of innovative, community-focused research that we should be promoting." The crowd began to applaud, but Dr. Kim gestured for silence. She turned to the board members, who huddled briefly in consultation before the board. Chair stood to speak. "The Board of Trustees accepts Dean Harrison's recommendation," the chair announced. "Ms. Chun's ban is hereby overturned, effective immediately. We also direct the administration to work with Ms. Chun and the music department to establish formal support for her research project." The auditorium exploded in cheers and applause. Students jumped to their feet, and Maya found herself surrounded by people congratulating her and expressing their joy that she would be able to perform again. But the board chair wasn't finished. "We also want to go beyond simply correcting this mistake. The university is establishing a new scholarship fund to support students who are conducting innovative research that benefits the campus community. Ms. Chun will be the first recipient of this scholarship, which will help ensure that financial concerns don't interfere with her important work." Maya felt overwhelmed by the announcement. Not only was she free to perform again, but she would have financial support that would allow her to focus more fully on her studies and her research. Dr. Kim then made an unexpected request. "Ms. Chun, would you be willing to share one of your compositions with us today? I think after everything we've discussed, we'd all like to hear the music that has brought so much joy to our campus." Maya's hands trembled as she walked to the piano that had been set up on the stage. The auditorium fell completely silent as she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she felt the weight of everything that had happened over. The past few weeks, the humiliation of being banned, the financial stress, the overwhelming support from her fellow students. And now this moment of vindication. She began to play a piece she had composed just days earlier, inspired by her entire experience. The melody started softly, reflecting the uncertainty and pain she had felt when she was first banned. But as the piece progressed, it grew stronger and more hopeful, incorporating themes that represented the support she had received and her determination to continue pursuing her dreams. The music filled the auditorium, and Maya could see tears in the eyes of many people in the audience. This wasn't just a performance. It was a moment of healing for the entire community that had been divided by the controversy. When the last note faded, the auditorium was silent for a few seconds, before erupting in the loudest applause Maya had ever heard. People stood and cheered, and she could see Jake, Lisa, Priya, and Professor Rodriguez all beaming with pride and joy. As Maya left the stage, Dean Harrison approached her. "Miss Chun," he said quietly, "I hope you can forgive an old administrator who lost sight of what really matters. Your music is a gift, and I'm sorry it took me so long to recognize that." Maya smiled and shook his hand. "Thank you for being willing to listen and change your mind. That takes courage." 6 months later, Maya's story had become part of university legend, She performed regularly on campus, now with official support and proper permits. Her research on public performance therapy had attracted attention from music therapy programs across the country, and she had been invited to present her findings at several academic conferences. The scholarship fund, established in her honor, had supported dozens of other students who were conducting innovative community-focused research. Dean Harrison had undergone sensitivity training and had worked with Professor Rodriguez to develop new policies that supported student creativity, while maintaining appropriate oversight. Most importantly,